Hi, I'm Kobus Bennemeer. I work with NETCB as a systems engineer. Um, my email address is listed here, kobusbennemeer@netcb.com, support@netcb.com. You can also use that to contact us if you have any support queries. Uh, let's continue here to the next slide. Overview. This topic is about upgrading ZENworks to the latest version. So we hope to actually address some of the daunting issues you might run into. So we're going to look at what's new, some planning uh, topics that you may want to consider, preparation, some upgrade hints. We're going to look at where you can find help and assistance, and then we can look at some questions and answers. In fact, for the next 30 minutes, I can jabber all I want. If you have questions, put it in the questions and answers questions box. We'll find some answers for that. Of course, you can also address that in email to myself. Right, so let's jump right in. ZENworks have changed with some of the year values in the last few years, about a decade or so. You may remember ZENworks 2017 and ZENworks 2020. And now all of a sudden we have 23, not 2023. So this came about when OpenText acquired Micro Focus. They're still in the process of rebranding all of the products from the Micro Focus store. And you may recall when Micro Focus acquired Novell and Attachmate and all of these, that also took some time to finish off. Now, just to look at the versions, in OpenText, they prefer to use a year with a period and then the major update. So, for instance, the ZENworks configuration management is then translated to 23, and the major update for ZCM was .3. That version has officially been adopted into 23.3. Another example here is Secure Messaging Gateway 7.0.2, or now known as SMG 23.3. So, a quick look at ZENworks 2023. Or 23 then. The latest version is 23.4. In the new version, there are a lot of enhancements. I tried to highlight a few that really appeal to me. For instance, enhanced Mac support. It supports Microsoft Active Directory, of course, for a while, but now Azure AD support has been added as well. There are quite a few enhancements in the ZENworks configuration console. So, for instance, you would have a settable timeout. You can search devices on their goods. Something more from a technical perspective, services are now run as containers in Docker. So that's one of the big changes there. The services don't run just by starting services from the ZENworks manager, configuration manager. There's also support for two-factor authentication. In fact, if you are licensed for ZENworks, you would have a free OpenText Advanced Authentication entitlement as well. This entitlement you get through other products as well, like GroupWise and Filer and the likes. So you may already have this set up, and you can add ZENworks to that. Also, from a bit of a technical perspective, your ZENworks agent will now require Microsoft.NET 4.8 as a default, otherwise it doesn't install. So that's something that you may want to roll out already. There's a revamped OS, a Mac OS installer. One of the big selling points, of course, is the next generation patch management, um, which is included with later versions of ZENworks. I think this one came about with ZENworks 2020.3, which, of course, is then 23.3 or 23.4. We have to migrate the patch management, of course, from the older infrastructure to the newer next generation patch management before end of November this year. This is the time frame that OpenText have determined when the support on the old mechanism will end. The new mechanism promises much faster patch scanning, better deployment options, and so forth. So it's really worthwhile moving to that as soon as possible. Something that you may be familiar with already, which was advocated really with the start of ZENworks 2020, the embedded database used to be Sybase, and that has been deprecated. We have to migrate to PostgreSQL. Um, there's a URL at the top there of the slide. There are a lot of information available on ZENworks. So this would help you do version comparison, see highlights for the new versions, and so forth. Here you can see a URL again, give you some migration or upgrade hints and tips. So in short, we would have specific ways to upgrade. If you have an old version of ZENworks, you'll have to get it to ZENworks 2017, and then you can upgrade to ZENworks 2020. From there, there's a easy upgrade really to ZENworks 2020 Update 2. If you happen to be on ZENworks 2020 Update 1, you can, of course, also then go to Update 2. Now, at this version, there's a really big operation going on. Typically, the OS version would change if you're using an appliance. So you need to redeploy the appliance and reattach your data to that. Or if you use servers, you would, of course, install a new server and migrate the data across. So that's quite a big operation. And from there, again, a fairly easy update to ZENworks 23.3. There was update 3 and update 3A for ZENworks 2020. Both of those have been incorporated in the ZENworks 23.3 update. So there's no separate path really. From update 2, you'd go to 23.3. Unless you are at update 3, then of course you would still see that. So a few planning topics to consider here. We see on the slide we have a table showing you some of the SUSE operating systems. This table actually goes back to /11, and if you're running ZENworks, older ZENworks up to 2017, you'll probably or you might still be on that platform. As you can see here, not all the versions of ZENworks would run on the same operating system. So at some point, you'll have to put down a new box and migrate your data across. If you look at the last line in there, /15 Service Pack 5, it's only the very latest version that would run on that particular platform. Of course, the goal is to get yourself to the latest version of OS and also the latest version of ZENworks. If you're still at /15 Service Pack 3, you are safe though. You would be able to run the latest version of ZENworks at the moment. So, if we look at migration options here, why would you migrate? Um, when we talk about migrate, it means that data is typically backed up from one host and then it's restored in a particular way on another host. So this makes it easy to upgrade, for instance, from /11 to /12 or to /15 in this case. For an appliance, it's a little bit easier because you're not really involved with the installation of the OS. The data is stored on a separate storage device, which is typically a virtual disk. And when you deploy a new appliance, you can simply move this disk to the new appliance, reattach it, and with much less configuration and hiccups, you're ready to go. In some cases, you may want to migrate just to get to a later version of OS. It is advisable to always use the same ZENworks version. In other words, you're not upgrading ZENworks in the same operation than updating your operating system. Another topic we might address here is why migrate a database. Sometimes you would have a plan to move your primary ZENworks server from one host to another. For instance, if you plan to migrate from a server deployment to an application or appliance deployment, it makes sense to only migrate the database. So both servers, the previous server and your new appliance, would both be primary servers, but your first primary server, which is known as the one with the embedded database, we would back that up, carry the data across, and then restore that, and effectively making the appliance then the first primary server for ZENworks. Now, this is all, of course, possible if you are running current versions of products. For instance, we mentioned Sybase is deprecated. ZENworks also runs on Oracle or other SQL flavors. There is a migration tool provided with every version of ZENworks to help you in migrating the data to Postgres. Now, the data could be migrated to an embedded database, or it could be migrated into a standalone database server, which of course would have its own advantages, but also adds a little bit to your administration. Having, for instance, a server dedicated with your database means that that can be installed in a cluster environment to protect that part of ZENworks. Now, something to keep in mind when you migrate databases, ZENworks actually have a few. You would typically have the ZENworks database, the Zen audit database, which usually goes hand in hand with the first. Then you have external services in ZENworks that also works with your data. For instance, Zookeeper helps in processing data collected from managed workstations. You would have Kafka that would process data among the different components of the ZENworks server. And if you have very large deployments, typically 10,000 managed workstations or more, you may also want to look at Vertica. Right, towards the bottom, appliances are addressed. Like we said, an appliance is really easy because you just redeploy the appliance. An appliance would include the operating system already. And then the data, as we've mentioned, is stored in a separate file system, which is typically connected to VA storage. Of course, you can tell from the path specified there, this is typically looking at ZENworks on Linux. Now, The same would be true for the Windows implementations for much of this discussion, but I haven't added paths for those. Typically, we deal with our clients on Linux platforms. Now, appliance upgrades are typically the quickest to really work with. If you don't have an appliance yet, I would recommend that you actually migrate to appliances. It's going to be a lot of work, typically the same than migrating to a different operating system, but at least in future, this will make your task much simpler. Right, we have a lot of preparation topics that would help you. Maybe the first one, we can look at this BAM. Use a lab, please. A lab will help you to learn the intricacies of the entire process. And you can use a lab in two ways, really. You can install ZENworks and do a simple upgrade, or you can clone your existing server and then, of course, test your upgrade process, um, see what would happen, and prepare for that. So, when you look at your ZENworks system, the first hint that I can give you here is plan small upgrades. Do it by server, not by technology. ZENworks is typically too big to upgrade as a single entity all at once. Sometimes you have to wait for processes to finish. For instance, when you've upgraded the first primary server, you have to wait for certain packages to rebuild. During the process of the first primary being upgraded, other primaries need to be offline. And then when you upgrade all the other primaries, that has to finish first before you actually get to the satellite servers, and only then do you look at the managed workstations. So it's quite an involved process. Rather do it in small steps that you can control how far you get and reach smaller milestones along the way. When you upgrade or migrate or redeploy, you have to plan for each host. You also have to plan for different components in ZENworks. For instance, when you upgrade servers and you have a separate ZENworks reporting server component, you have to look at whether these things will still communicate with each other. Or when you upgrade a server, what is the requirements now for instance, interfacing with Active Directory or eDirectory? So there's quite a few things involved when you decide what you're going to upgrade and how far you plan to upgrade it. If you have multiple servers and you have to get them, for instance, to ZENworks 2020.2, you have to get basically all the primary servers to that before you can continue upgrading to 23.3. So that means that you will actually reiterate your upgrade process quite a bit. Develop a backup plan for each. If your project doesn't work, you have to decide whether you're going to roll back. Now, remember, we deal with a database system, so you need to think about how this component will work if it's rolled back and it's now out of sync with other services. Typically, it catches up, but there could be potential problems. Decide critical point for rollbacks. For instance, if you have a 24-hour window to upgrade a server, how far do you have to get before you decide it's not successful in that time window and then have to roll back? Now, when you do rollbacks, you can do hard rollbacks and soft rollbacks. A hard rollback would be take the service back to where it was, maybe through a backup or a VMware snapshot. But in other words, that means that entire upgrade was not successful and you rather go back to a working solution beforehand. A soft rollback could be just rolling back a step or two and then reattempting that in order to make your upgrade successful. Now, part of preparation, collect the software, collect the license keys and the registration keys. You'll need these along the way, and it's a real hassle if you find that you don't have those. Now, you may want to contact your account manager for these. In a big company, that this might be another office in your company, or if you have access to the Microfocus portal, you can of course collect them there. Check on the CA certificate. The last thing you want is being in an upgrade process and then realize the certificate ran out and you have to remint it. Now, this certificate typically lasts for 10 years. It's a CA certificate after all. But if you only have 60 days left, rather remint that certificate, because you have to wait for a few weeks so it reach all the different components in ZENworks. If a workstation or a server miss an update for the certificate, there are utilities that you can use to manually update that, or somebody will have to touch that machine in person. So you don't want to do that. Rather wait for this remint process to finish. Check download schedules. If the primary server is involved with downloading patches or content replication for other systems, other components in your system, rather reschedule that. Look for a quiet time in the schedule. Maybe it only downloads once a week, so then you're lucky. If you can schedule it, of course, outside of that schedule. Schedule the upgrade outside of the download schedule. Or you can cancel it for the duration of the upgrade, just to make sure that your server don't get busy with other stuff, trying to update the database and so forth, and then you might miss information. You have to schedule downtime with your users as well. For instance, if you're going to take the primary servers offline while the first primary is being processed, it could mean that users don't have access to applications that would sit on the desktop or that's typically deployed through the ZENworks Explorer window. So you don't want to cause that kind of interruption. You may want to look at doing this after hours or any time frame that will least impact your users. Bottom right, by the way, you can see the part of the ZCC screen that looks at the zone certificate authority. And you can see this particular server only expires next year. So we should be good if we upgrade it now. Some more preparation. Ensure that all ZENworks servers are live. It happens that satellite servers, specifically satellite servers, are chosen because they are close to users or close to resources that they would service. And it could be that these servers have been decommissioned or changed or upgraded, and they're not fully functional as satellite servers. What you don't want is servers that doesn't communicate well in the system. In other words, if they were supposed to replicate content or upload updates from that site to a primary server, and it's not happening, it means that the database, of course, may be inconsistent with data. You may find some managed workstations that haven't been touched or connected to for some time, and this is not a good state for your zone. So fix up all the problems. If it's a server that's decommissioned, it's particularly difficult getting rid of that in ZENworks because according to the ZENworks system, there's still content on that server. It still has a role in the zone. So see if you can fix that up for the server, or see if you can remove those roles. The zman command is actually particularly useful with that. Once you have removed those roles, you can then get rid of that server. On the right hand side, you can see the software and license download portal from Micro Focus, and it shows you actually some of the downloads that you can make for your version. I'll get around to talking about this a bit later as well. For backups, in my experience, you need backups. Many backups, different types of backups, all through the process. If you want to soft roll back a single step, you need to have a backup of something just before that. So, what are typical backups? Most people are familiar with tape backups. You can, of course, also back up the database, which is always a good idea. You should do this frequently anyway for typical maintenance and integrity for your system. So you have a ZMan backup, and you need to do this to back up at least the ZENworks database and the Zen audit database. You can also export the database if you're going to migrate the database or go to another platform, for instance, server to appliance or the likes. You would also use PG dump. Of course, this assumes that you are already on Postgres. If you use Oracle or something else, you would use tools provided for that database platform. Another way to backup, virtualization snapshots. Now, this is particularly useful if you're going to do a step on the same server, for instance, apply a patch or apply an upgrade. If, however, you are going to migrate the data, in other words, you deploy a new appliance and then you need to move the disk to that new appliance, a snapshot won't work. You cannot move a disk that's snapshotted. So in that case, clone the virtual machine. Then you have a full backup of that server as it stood. Some more preparation. Read a lot, gather a lot of information. I have here colleagues. You can, of course, assess your peers, inquire, require, ask for information. Documentation, very important. The support website, if you feel like there would be specific issues, like with a database, typically one would have problems with the database and some service doesn't start because of that. And then the community. Micro Focus have a nice community website where there's a lot of information. Of course, Micro Focus have a wealth of documentation for ZENworks as well on every version. There's nearly 80 documents just in the online documentation. Something that I didn't mention here, it will appear on another slide. There are also training videos and how-to videos that will help you with the major steps along the way. So those are also valuable resources. One that I can quickly highlight there is ZenCast. One of the developers for ZENworks has, over the past 3 years, submitted many videos. He typically does 2 videos a month, and these have been added to that website. Another step in preparation, typically you have to apply patches before you upgrade to the next version. There are a few patches that are required for every version. For instance, if we look in this list here on the right hand side, this is a nice viewer kmviewer.sas.microfocus.com. It shows for any particular product and version which are the current required patches. Some of the patches would, of course, supersede each other. And then if you look at the list here, it would give you patches for components like the ZENworks reporting server is there. This patch here, PH210420, is actually a patch that you use in preparation for upgrade to ZRS 8.11. You'll notice the PRU files. These are typically monthly updates that will come out. The field test files, these are the cumulative patches. This is loaded if you use the appliance, typically through the appliance administration view. That is now in addition to ZCC. Right. So these patches are hyperlinked. You can read more about them. Every patch that you download from the software and licensing download portal would also have a README that tells you exactly how to install it, how to roll back from that particular patch. And then something that's not visible here, for ZENworks 2020 Update 2, you had to load at least patch 956 and 1016, if I remember correctly. But those two are the minimum required if you want to upgrade to ZENworks 23 Update 3. All right, you find all of this in the patches, and you find that in the community and so forth. All right, some more preparation. Involve the team. In a smaller company, typically an administrator would have access and responsible for many things like the database on the server where ZENworks is running, and you're in control of the virtualization platforms and so on and so forth. That makes getting all the tasks done, of course, much easier. In a larger corporation, you might have separate database administrators. You would have maybe different server administrators, virtualization platform administrators, and so forth. So make sure you involve these people. They need to know, of course, about the upgrade, but they would also be sources of information. And when you do the upgrade, they may not be directly involved, but at least you can have them on standby. If you plan to upgrade ZENworks over a weekend, particular server, and something goes wrong with the database, you just need to restore that. You might want the database administrator to be able to answer your call at 1 in the morning and quickly assist you with that. The account manager, of course, good for licensing information, registration keys, and so forth. Help desk operators, always good to involve them. They need to answer calls from users. For instance, you have to wait a little bit and try again later, or you can work around this problem by clicking on that option. Business risk managers for larger corporations are typically key in getting this information communicated properly to the users. Well, any kind of PR office would be able to assist you with that. Some upgrade hints along the way. Before you start with your server update, make sure that the server resources are correct. If you have upgraded through 3 versions of already, maybe the VM doesn't have all the CPU cores needed for the latest version, or RAM requirements, or space requirements. So make sure that is updated before you start. Backups along the way, like we described, very important all the time. note down the steps that you take. Read the patch and backout steps. Of course, these things help you if you have to rerun a patch or re-attempt a particular task to do that. In fact, if you read a lot, you might actually find some documentation would have missing steps, or somebody tried something wrong. Um, and they put that in a document as an answer on the internet. So wherever you read about stuff, especially if you search in Google, make sure you just verify that source as well. I've mentioned pre-migration patches, like we saw for ZENworks reporting server. There are certain components that would require that. When you have to upgrade the server operating system and ZENworks, typically you do the ZENworks server first and then the ZENworks product afterwards. If you're going to upgrade from a major version to another major version, it's always a migration. There's no upgrade path from 11 to 12 or 12 to 15. Right, follow log files. Now there are many log files, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. Var op novel ZENworks and then system update and a nice big number. If you are on later versions already, for instance, when you reach ZENworks 23.3, then that folder changes to Microfocus. Var op Microfocus ZENworks system update. Now, just something on this key that you see here. The 5.0 indicates it's a system update. In the first example there, the 2001, that's actually version 20, update 1. So you can imagine if it's ZENworks 2020 update 2, that will show 2002. And then there's some other identifiers. Mostly it will show you FC5 in there. Towards the end, you can see a date and then a digit afterwards. So that one shows you this update was attempted on 30th of June 2020. And it was the first update, hence the 0. If you look at the second example, that one says 1st of August 2021, and it was the 6th attempt on that day already. So quite interesting to see that. There are a few files in there when you do upgrades. Here are some of the help and assistance that you find online. Of course, the ZENworks documentation. From that view, you can access any version of documentation, really. The community URL is also provided there. We have videos on YouTube. Microfocus will have channels there, as you can see, and you would actually have links to ZENworks and other products. Service request. If you have a subscription with Microfocus for support, you can of course go to that portal and then log a service request directly with ZENworks. They would typically assign it to one of their partners, which is local to you. Then if you have questions or just want to let Microfocus know that you are planning an upgrade so that they are ready to answer questions you may have, you can also email them. And then, of course, you can also contact us. We've been working with ZENworks for years and years now. Personally, I've experience on ZENworks 4, 7, ZENworks 10 a little bit, and then ZENworks 2017 and ZENworks 2020 and 23 now. Any questions? I don't see any questions. All right. That's it for now. See you around.